Today's episode of Off the Timeline is titled The 1997 SEC Season That Accidentally Created Modern College Football. There are certain moments in sports history where the entire future almost changes. And in this alternate history, it happens in the SEC and it starts in Knoxville in 1997, with Peyton Manning standing in formation while cowbells shake the stadium so loudly that CBS broadcasters can barely hear themselves speak. Because in this alternate history, Tennessee accidentally invents modern football years early. And the scary part? This feels way more believable than it probably should. This is one of the wildest college football alternate history timelines we've ever explored. And in today's college football alternate history, this heavily involves Tennessee, Oklahoma, Texas, and Mississippi State. And trust me, by the end of this college football alternate history, you may be thinking to yourself that the SEC almost changed college football years before anyone realized it, because all of this begins with one coaching move, Phillip Fulmer leaving Tennessee for Oklahoma. And that sets the table for Oklahoma panicking. Oklahoma football feels lost. The dynasty energy from the Barry Switzer years is fastly fading, with probation fallout, booster frustration, and recruiting instability. The Sooners desperately need structure, and instead of making the disastrous Schnellenberger hire, Oklahoma goes after a rising SEC coach in Phillip Fulmer. And Oklahoma offers a huge contract, complete authority, national recruiting control, and Fulmer accepts, and Tennessee fans absolutely lose their minds. Now pause for a second, because this is where the butterfly effects start. With no Fulmer at Tennessee, this sets a chain reaction of college football mutating very quickly. And this sets the table to Peyton Manning rebelling. Tennessee boosters immediately want I formation football, defense, tradition, and quote unquote real SEC football. But there's just one problem: Peyton Manning. Manning quietly tells Tennessee officials he does not want to be part of a conservative offense. He wants freedom at the line, NFL reads, tempo, spacing, and control. And eventually, Tennessee lands on the weirdest compromise imaginable: traditional head coach, experimental offensive coordinator, and at the time, obscure offensive mind named Mike Leach. At the time, almost nobody nationally knows who he is, but inside coaching circles, people think he's either a genius or crazy, and sometimes both. And honestly, SEC football in the 90s, the idea of Tennessee throwing four wide receivers all over the field probably sounds illegal. And that's what makes this alternate history so fun. And that sets the table for Tennessee looking wrong. 1995 arrives, and suddenly Tennessee football looks off. Wide receiver splits look absurd. No huddle sequences appear. Quick timing throws everywhere. Older Tennessee fans dislike this initially. Local sports radio melts down. You can practically hear callers screaming, "This ain't SEC football." Meanwhile, younger fans love it. ESPN becomes fascinated because Tennessee suddenly becomes entertaining chaos, and Peyton Manning evolves into football's test laboratory. And that sets the table for Texas panicking, because the Texas boosters are watching this unfold in horror. Because Oklahoma now has SEC trench football, Fulmer recruiting Texas aggressively, discipline and stability, while Tennessee is suddenly attracting offensive recruits from Texas high schools. The Longhorns begin fracturing internally. One side wants Ricky Williams, smash mouth football and tradition, and the other side wants spread concepts, offensive innovation, and modernization. Sports radio becomes completely unhinged years earlier than in real life, and recruits start noticing, especially quarterbacks. But while everyone argues about Tennessee and Texas, something terrifying is forming quietly in Starkville. And that sets the table for Mississippi State entering the room. Jackie Sherrill watches Tennessee's offense and sees the future immediately, and he does not like it, because he realizes if this style succeeds, it could destroy old school SEC football forever. So Mississippi State becomes the resistance. Not metaphorically, literally, philosophically. Cowboys become symbolic of toughness, defense, physical football, and anti-gimmick football. National media loves the contrast, and suddenly Tennessee versus Mississippi State becomes the battle of the SEC, future versus past. And that sets the table to Steve Spurrier adding interest. And when Steve Spurrier enters the story, this increases the chaos exponentially. Spurrier mocks everybody. He calls Tennessee arena football. He calls Oklahoma 3 yards and a cloud of boredom. He calls Mississippi State a tractor pull of shoulder pads. Every quote becomes national news. And to be clear, these are alternate history quotes, not ones made in real life. And college football isn't just regional anymore. It becomes personality-driven entertainment years earlier than in real life. And then 1997 arrives. And this alternate history officially becomes mythology. And that sets the table for the battle for the SEC. SEC championship game, Tennessee versus Mississippi State. CBS markets the game as the future versus the past. Pre-game coverage asks, is spread football ruining the sport? Is defense becoming obsolete? Is Peyton Manning soft? Are cowbells embarrassing? Is the SEC losing its identity? America becomes divided on this topic, and older football fans watching this game become emotionally invested. And that sets the table for total disaster. First half, absolute catastrophe for Tennessee. Mississippi State destroys them physically. Peyton Manning throws 3 interceptions. Cowbells are deafening. CBS microphones distort constantly. At halftime, Mississippi State leads 17-3. Commentators openly wonder maybe finesse football cannot survive SEC defenses. And across football, old school college football fans feel completely validated. And then Mike Leach completely loses his mind. And that sets the table for the moment football changed in this universe. Second half, no huddle every play. 4 wide formations constantly. Peyton calling protections himself. Tempo accelerating. Mississippi State defenders exhausted. CBS announcers can barely keep up with the pace, and suddenly it works. Tennessee storms back. Final drive. Peyton audibles repeatedly at the line. Cowbell shaking everywhere. Defense confused. Touchdown Tennessee, and in that moment, college football changes forever. And that sets the table for the image. The iconic image of the decade, Peyton Manning, exhausted, helmet off, sweat pouring everywhere, holding up 4 fingers signaling 4 wide, cowbell shaking in the background. This becomes part of ESPN intros, magazine covers, SEC films, documentaries, and mythology. The moment modern football was born. But great alternate history also needs tragedy, and waiting in the background is Oklahoma, Phillip Fulmer's Oklahoma, geared towards defense, power football, discipline, and SEC trench philosophy imported into the Big 12. The national championship becomes mentor versus student, and in the end, Oklahoma wins 27-24. Peyton Manning leaves college football without a national championship, and somehow that almost makes the story more legendary, because now it feels tragic, mythological, like one of those sports stories people argue about forever. And honestly, that's what's so fascinating about this alternate history, because it feels like something college football barely avoided. You can imagine the furious sports radio callers, old school SEC fans screaming at TVs, ESPN debate shows melting down, Texas boosters panicking, coaches copying Tennessee concepts, Mississippi State fans treating cowbells like relics, and somewhere out there, there's probably an alternate universe where modern football really did begin in Knoxville in 1997. And if you enjoyed this college football alternate history and want more chaotic butterfly effect timelines, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know, would you have sided with Tennessee's future football or Mississippi State's old school resistance?